This thing on? Great. We're going to start the show off with some surveyological research. I want you to link your two pinky fingers together and stick your hands up in the air if you've ever been to San Marino. Let's see, you've been to San Marino? You've been, oh my god, wow! We've got a lot of San Marino tourists in the building. You've been, amazing. Yeah, I wish I could say the same. Anyway, if you've been to San Marino, you'll know about their claim that they're the oldest republic on planet Earth. They were created in 301 AD, the same year that Armenia became the first ever country to recognise Christianity as their official religion. But before I talk more about the history of San Marino, I just want to layer some praise on top of the country. So, San Marino grew up in a time when hundreds of small city-states and micronations inhabited the northern part of the Italian peninsula. And every single one of them was trying to take over its neighbours. Big fish ate little fish, but there was always a bigger fish. And San Marino was a very goddamn little fish. San Marino has fought several wars in its life, and there have been numerous plots made to take over the city-state. There have been attempts to surprise attack the city-state, or bribe a few citizens to open the gates and get the city conquered, but every single time something would just go horribly wrong for the invaders, San Marino would survive through the skin of its teeth, and out of the sheer astronomical amount of luck they've had, somehow the nation of San Marino still exists today. When the Papal States conquered North Italy, they could have very easily occupied San Marino forever, but they didn't. When Napoleon conquered the north of Italy, you know, the greatest conqueror who loved taking over everything, he for some reason didn't bother occupying San Marino. In fact, when Cavour and later Mussolini took over Italy, neither of them chose to occupy San Marino. Guess who else didn't choose to occupy San Marino for a while? Hitler. When he took over the peninsula, he waited an entire year before he felt like he was ready to take over San Marino. He just didn't feel like it, I guess. And in fact, even when he did take over San Marino, he only held onto it for not even a week before the Allies kicked him out. So in other words, the fact that San Marino still exists today is just an actual miracle, in my opinion. It is shocking. So many awful conquerors just chose not to do the thing they very obviously could have done quite easily. But anyway, here's another thing I like about San Marino. They celebrate their history quite a lot. Like, for example, they celebrate the day their founding father died. They celebrate the day that the Papal States withdrew their troops from San Marino. And better yet, they celebrate the day their fascist regime collapsed. Oh, did I not mention? Yes, San Marino actually used to be ruled by a brutal fascist dictatorship. In 1923, the Sammarinese Fascist Party won an election, and by 1926 they were a one-party state. Now I am very curious about how fascist propaganda worked in San Marino, simply because the whole idea of fascism is, rah, we're the big dogs, we're gonna shoot all the immigrants who are coming for your children, we're gonna retake lost territory, we're gonna erase all this national humiliation, we're gonna take over the world, and when we're done, anybody who ever said any bad words about us will be begging for our mercy. And that's all well and good in a country like Germany, say, which actually is capable of conquering land, but we are talking about San Bloody Reno here. It must have been absolutely hilarious watching some Mussolini fanboys try and cosplay tough stuff, despite running literally the militarily weakest country in the world by far. Like, not even close. Aww, how's my little fascist boy want an ice cream? Oh no, don't hurt me. Got your lolly. That was lovely. Now maybe I'll be a little nice to you next week if you suck Mussolini's toes a bit harder. Not because I want you to, but just out of sheer sympathy. You actually managed to make Hitler's depressing sub look like a daddy. Oh my god. However, in 1941, a bunch of communists and socialists started an underground against the fascist party, and on the 28th of June, 1943, they held a protest so big that the fascists had to remove their government from existence and call a new election. That day, which the protest took place, is now celebrated every single year in San Marino. Anyway, now that San Marino wasn't a fascist state anymore, 100,000 refugees, many of whom were Jewish, fled the Nazi terror and arrived seeking asylum in San Marino. And at the time, the San Marinese population wasn't even 15,000. So it was very hard to house all of these people. They had to cram, and I mean crammed, tightly pack these people into railway tunnels, into churches, into the couple of palaces they had. Any room that was big enough to fit a bunch of people, they were going to fit people into that building. I also imagine it was very, very difficult to feed all these people, considering that their population was a lot less actually than a sixth of the number of people they had to let into the country, especially considering that 0.2% of the population works in agriculture, at least now, so I'm not sure how they fed all these people. Anyway, in the summer of 1944, the British, acting on faulty intelligence, bombed San Marino. They had to apologise for it, and after the war, they gave San Marino £80,000 in compensation. Finally, on the 13th of September 1944, the armies of Adolf Hitler came knocking at the gates of San Marino and occupied the city. However, just 4 days later, on the 17th, the armies of Britain and its dominions came in to liberate San Marino. The battle lasted for 3 days before, on the 20th of September, literally a week after they arrived in the city, the armies of the Nazi regime had to escape and run away, very bravely. Anyway, in 1945, a coalition of communists and socialists won the election in San Marino, and as we all know, the USA hates communism, so they spent the entire time the communist regime in San Marino was in power trying to undermine this obvious threat to US security. Anyway, in 1957 there was a constitutional crisis, a coup, and then 150 Italian soldiers tried to do an intervention, and at the end of it, the Communist Party was removed from power, and so after 12 years of communist rule, the San Marinese brush with communism had come to an end. But in summary, the fact that San Marino still exists as an independent state is nothing short of a miracle. And this raises an obvious question. If San Marino claims to be the oldest republic on Earth, or the oldest country on Earth, and it did survive the entirety of the last millennium, how long has it actually existed for? And in fact, can it claim to be the oldest republic on Earth? So, in this video, we're going to investigate the historical record and work out if they actually get to claim to be the oldest republic on Earth. And if not, who does? Get your detective caps on, everybody. This is a detective cap. Get your detective caps on, everybody, because today we're going on an investigation. Let's dive in.
Part 1. I hope you enjoyed my 8-minute long video intro. Now let's learn about the origin story of San Marino, according to San Marinese legend and tradition. I am only now realizing I should have made a joke about how San Marino's origin story is that it was bitten by a radioactive San Marino.
Like every great superhero, San Marino has an origin story. However, like every superhero, San Marino can exaggerate that origin story for PR purposes. For example, did you know Spider-Man was actually only bitten by one radioactive spider? Supposedly, the origin story of San Marino is that, during the days of the Roman Empire, a Christian stonemason was being persecuted. So, he decided to escape to the top of Mount Titano, where no one could hurt him. There, on Mount Titano, he built a cathedral. However, eventually, a community sprung up around the mountain, and that community of people, that settlement of people, would come to be known as San Marino. If this tale is true, then that would mean that San Marino was founded 1,724 years ago. But do you know what other implications are there if this tale turns out to be true? Well, it's that San Marino was literally created as a safe haven for those fleeing persecution. It was founded by somebody fleeing religious discrimination. Therefore, the entire country should exist as a bastion of independence and freedom for anybody fleeing danger. And under that logic, maybe it's fitting that 100,000 people fled there during World War II. It's all connected. Everything in life has meaning. Anyway, here's a couple more fun facts about the origin story of San Marino. In 1901, medievalist William Miller published an article detailing the entire history of San Marino up until that year. It's a very highly read source about the history of San Marino, and it's actually one of the most important sources for this video. As always, I link every single one of my sources down below. However, if you can only read one of my sources, read that one. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because as part of the research for that article, William Miller visited San Marino twice, and on one of those visits, he writes that they showed him the bed where St. Marinus supposedly slept. He also writes that in 1628, the remains of St. Marinus were transferred to the main churchyard in San Marino. This was also a very curious fact for me, considering that bones can decay within as little as 100 years. So I'm very curious as to what remains were left to transfer. But there better be something left to guard, because Miller writes that every single year they hire 2 new people to guard the remains. Like, they stand guard and I guess prevent anybody from stealing the remains of St. Marinus. Okay, I have one question for you guys. Guard the remains from who? Frickin' Aquaman? Who is going to steal the remains of a 1600 years old dead saint? If there was any remains left to transfer in 1628, there won't be any left in 1901. Now, to be fair to them, I did do some googling about these guards to see if I could find out any more about them, and I couldn't find anything online. And this means 2 things. It either means that they don't do the guard thing anymore, or it means that they never did it at all, and William Miller got it wrong. If anybody from San Marino is watching this, or you know anybody from San Marino, can you please, provide some insight? Do you still, appoint guardians to guard the remains of St. Marinus? Or did you even do that in the first place?
Part 2. Time to go through the history of San Marino to provide enough context for when I find out if San Marino is the oldest republic.
Now that we have the official story out of the way, the story that is told by San Marinese culture and tradition, let's go over the evidence. How much documentary evidence is there to talk about the life of St. Marinus with? Well, according to the article by William Miller, the first known document that could potentially confirm the existence of St. Marinus was in 511 AD, when a monk wrote about another monk that he had heard of that lived atop Mount Titano. In 756, King Pippin the Short of the Franks, and yes, that actually was his name, made a donation to the Pope. However, calling it a donation implies that it is a lot more generous than it actually was. When people say that the donation of Pippin occurred, that he made a donation to the Pope, what he actually meant was he held the kingdom of Lombardy at gunpoint and forced Lombardy to make a donation to the Pope. But anyway, there was a big document which contained a whole list of towns and places and estates that had to be handed over to the Pope. One of the items on that list can be read several different ways. One of them is S. Martini, which sounds like a drink. The other one is S. Marini, or Castellum S. Mariani. Some people have interpreted this as San Marino, and by some people, I mean a pope at one point in history, because at one time the Pope wanted to assert his dominion and authority over San Marino, and he used this document as his justification. He said, this document very clearly says that San Marino was given to me, therefore checkmate you bloody San Marinese, bippity boppity, you are my property. In his article, William Miller also argues that this place probably doesn't refer to San Marino. His argument is that the Castellum S. Marini didn't exist. There was no evidence of any castle near Mount Titano at that time. No evidence of a defensive structure, no watchtower, no nothing. Therefore, this document was probably referring to something else. So far we've reached the 8th century AD, and all of the evidence that proves San Marino's existence amounts to 2 documents that may or may not refer to San Marino, but probably not according to a medievalist who wrote about it. However, the next document on the list is a document that definitely, without a doubt, 100% confirms the existence of San Marino. And that is a document that describes an 885 AD lawsuit. Or at least the original version is from 885 AD. The version we have is from the 11th century, about 200 years later, and an article that I found about the version we have acknowledges that a few of the words will be different, like the toponyms and the place names, for instance. So this document isn't going to be perfectly accurate. However, we're pretty sure that this document does refer to San Marino. Basically, according to the document, there was a lawsuit between the Duke of Rimini and a guy called Stephen. He was the magistrate and bishop of San Marino's monastery. However, the document also mentions that there was a castle and a settlement near San Marino Monastery. This document is the earliest known reference to San Marino in human history. Allow me to describe the lawsuit to you. Basically, the Duke of Rimini went to the Stephen, who ran the monastery, and said, some of the land that you own in western modern-day San Marino is illegal. It's not rightfully yours, it's mine. And so Stephen said, actually, it's mine. Go away. The Duke of Rimini said, fine, I'm going to file a lawsuit and I'm going to obliterate you in court. So, Rimini filed the lawsuit and the Bishop of Montefeltro came along with 30 jurors and magistrates ready to judge this trial. During the trial, this conversation happened. Mr. Duke of Rimini, forgive me for going off topic here. This isn't really related to the subject of the trial, but out of interest, how much evidence do you actually have to suggest that you are the rightful owner of the lands that you are demanding from Stephen here? None whatsoever. None? Okay, in which case, Stephen, I rule in favour of you, all the lands are yours. Okay, before I adjourn the court, does anybody have anything else they want to say? Rimini, can I appeal the result? Dismissed. Denied. No, you're not appealing anything, yeah? So anyway, the court ruled in favour of San Marino, and interestingly, there is still absolutely no further evidence that San Marino ever existed until another document was written about them in 951. So in conclusion, the earliest possible date at which San Marino is known to have existed is 855. San Marino could have been created at absolutely any point in history up until 855, which is the earliest date at which we know it existed. So presumably it existed for a few years before then, who knows? So you might be thinking, if everybody keeps repeating this story about St. Marinus, then what's the original, text? There must be like a book or a fable or something, or somebody that wrote the tale of St. Marinus for the first time. Well, I did some research and I couldn't find anything. I could not find absolutely any original document relating to how the tale of St. Marinus originated. Eventually I found on Wikipedia that the first documents that describe his life were in the 10th century AD, so 600 years after he supposedly lived.
Part 3. Let's learn more about San Marino's history.
So anyway, San Marino increased the size of its territory by purchasing other people's land. San Marino got bigger before it achieved the height of its territorial expansion in 1463. It has maintained that size ever since. During the 1200s and the 1300s AD, there were hundreds of city-states. Most of them didn't last long. So San Marino got involved in a bunch of wars. All of them were getting into wars with each other. And in the 1290s, there were at least 2 occasions in which larger countries tried to impose their authority over San Marino. For instance, in 1291, the Pope looked at San Marino and said, hey, Mr. San Marino, buddies, you have got to pay tribute to me, because I officially have authority over San Marino, so give me money. And San Marino said, absolutely not, we're not paying you anything. And the Pope responded with, fine, if you won't pay me anything, I'm going to file a lawsuit. I'm going to take you to court, and I'm going to obliterate you in court. So, the case went to court. So they called in a judge to handle the case, but it was a judge from Rimini, the same Rimini that lost a lawsuit to San Marino in 885. Regardless, the judge ruled in favour of San Marino, and San Marino has just won another court case. Fun fact, one time somebody lost a battle, lost a few cities I imagine, and had to escape to San Marino, and when he arrived in San Marino, somebody greeted him by calling him a rude name. It was such a horrible insult to his reputation. Do you know what he called him? Do you know what he was called? He was called something that translates to Mr. Lose Cities. Mr. Lose Cities. I love how that hundreds of years ago, there was an era that cringy toddler humour was considered a good insult at the time. Like, how easy it must have been to come up with jokes at the time. Wow. Anyway, in 1631, the Papal States expanded, and now the only country that bordered San Marino was the Papal States. Luckily, in 1631, the Papal States agreed to recognise the independence of San Marino, and so San Marino was safe. Until 1739, because in 1739, the Papal States occupied San Marino. 3 months later, the Papal States withdrew their troops leaving San Marino independent again. That is the first successful conquest of San Marino in history, after several failed conquests by other cities. Every year now, the San Marinese celebrate February 5th as the day the Papal States withdrew.
Part 3. Is San Marino the oldest surviving republic?
Okay, so now that we know the history of San Marino, even though the early history of San Marino is not well documented, how long has San Marino been a republic? Because it's pretty much always called itself a republic. In 1600s, they passed the Statutes of the Republic of San Marino. The Republic of San Marino has, for hundreds of years, been considered the Republic of San Marino. But calling yourself a republic doesn't make you a republic. A republic is a country where the citizens vote for their leaders in elections. And San Marino's first ever general election, at least in the modern sense, was in 1906. So has San Marino only been a republic since 1906? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Currently, here's how democracy works in San Marino. Every 5 years, the entire population of San Marino, that's old enough to vote, gets together to elect the Grand and General Council. This is the ruling body of San Marino. If you're German, then this is your equivalent of the Reichstag. If you're British, this is your equivalent of Parliament or the House of Commons. And every 6 months, the Grand and General Council does its own election. 2 people are elected to serve in the position of Captain's Regent. These 2 people are the heads of state of San Marino. They serve a 6-month term. San Marino is what is called a diarchy. That is a country with 2 heads of state. So San Marino is currently a republic. But at what point in its history did it become a republic? Now we're going to go back through the history of San Marino and work out the exact moment. As you doubtless know, the early history of San Marino was quite poorly documented. However, the earliest known governing body of San Marino was called the Orengo. The head of every single family in San Marino had a right to sit on the Orengo. This body made decisions for the country, and in the year 1000 AD, all the power held by the feudal bishop was transferred to the Orengo. Though we know little about the early history of the San Marino community, it is likely that major decisions were taken during meetings in which members of all the families took part, meaning that political powers were not delegated to anyone and that a direct democracy system was operative. But, increasingly, a government made out of the heads of every single family became more and more impractical. So, the Orengo had to hand off some of its power. The Orengo started electing 2 consuls to run the country and serve as heads of state. You may remember from earlier that nowadays the consuls are called the Captain's Regents, but don't let that confuse you, they are the same thing, just they changed the name. So they started electing consuls in the 1200s, but then, in the 1400s, they started electing the Grand and General Council, the same Grand and General Council that still runs the country today. However, soon enough, a problem began to arise. You see, the Orengo was voting for these consuls, and they were voting for members of the Grand and General Council. However, as they gave away more and more of their power to the consuls and the Grand and General Council, and 1 or 2 other councils, but the Grand and General Council was the main one, well, inevitably, they started to lose more and more power. And the Grand and General Council began to eat away at the power of the Orengo, began to absorb more and more power, until, in 1551, something terrible happened to the Orengo. The Orengo convened for the very last time. The Orengo was gone. But you might be thinking, wait a minute, doesn't the Orengo elect the Grand and General Council? Without the Orengo, who's going to elect the Grand and General Council? And the Grand and General Council thought about that. They said, oh my god, good point, without the Orengo, who's going to vote for us? But then, the Grand and General Council had a brainwave. They said, I know who can vote for me. How about me? You're going to have to stick with me here, guys. When appointing new members of the Grand and General Council, what if those members are appointed by the Grand and General Council? It's genius! Because now, members of the Grand and General Council could simply appoint their own family members to the Grand and General Council. So the state of San Marino went from a republic to an oligarchy of several families basically appointing themselves to serve in the same body again and again and again. And on top of that, being appointed to the Grand and General Council was a lot like being appointed to the House of Lords, if you're British, although not everybody watching is British. Okay, here's a better comparison. Being appointed to the Grand and General Council was like being appointed Pope. And by that I mean it was a lifetime appointment. Once you were there for life. But then, gradually, more and more people realised, wait a minute, this isn't working. We're going to have to call the Orengo for another session again. So gradually, more and more people started shouting, we have to restore the Orengo! Restore the Orengo! Woo! Restore the Orengo! And finally, in 1906, something amazing happened. The Orengo, and then it convened. So anyway, somebody in the Orengo put forward a motion that the Grand and General Council would maintain the same amount of power that it currently had. That motion was rejected by 90% of the people who showed up. Although it's worth noting that of those who were eligible to attend the Orengo in 1906, that is, the heads of each household, only about 54% actually attended. Then somebody else put forward a motion, should local governments in San Marino have a number of members proportional to the amount of people they represent? That motion was accepted by 94% of the people. And so, San Marino was a republic again. Until 1923, when the fascists came back. San Marino only became a republic again in the 1940s, after fascism was overthrown. And so, San Marino has only actually been a republic, continually at least, since the 1940s. And even if you say that San Marino has been a republic since 1906, well, the USA has been a republic since the 1700s. San Marino is absolutely not the oldest republic in the world. However, there is another way we could judge this. A republic is a country where the people run the country through representatives that they elect. And if you go back far enough in San Marino's history, when they were only run by the Orengo, I'm going to cover up the consuls so you know they don't exist at this point. When San Marino was only run by the Orengo, I don't consider that a republic. There's no elections going on here. That is just the head of each family having a say in the governing body. That isn't representative democracy, in my opinion. That isn't a republic. That's just direct democracy. But then in the 1200s, they started electing consuls to run the country. And that is the moment at which I think San Marino becomes a republic. It ceases to be a direct democracy and becomes a republic. Anyway, San Marino slid into an oligarchy in the 1500s, unfortunately. So in my opinion, it depends on how do you want to measure this, okay? If we measure it by which country in the world today was the first one to become a republic, even if it has not continually been a republic since it became a republic for the first time, then San Marino is in fact the oldest republic in the world. Because if San Marino became a republic in the 1200s, then it is the oldest republic in the world. So long as we do not add the condition in that you have to have been a republic for the entirety of that time since you first became a republic, then yes, San Marino is the oldest republic in the world. But if the criteria is, of all the countries alive today, which country was the earliest one to become a republic and has been continually a republic since it became a republic, then San Marino has only been a republic since the 40s. I would say the USA would probably be the oldest republic. I can't think of any country that's continually been a republic for longer than the USA. So, depending on the criteria, the oldest surviving republic in the world is either the least powerful country in the world or the most powerful country in the world. But some of you might be wondering, Ben, how on earth has San Marino managed to survive this long? I mean, San Marino is such a weak country. How has it not been conquered for potentially over 1,000 years? How on earth has San Marino lasted this long? Well, I have a couple of theories. My first theory is that what's the benefit in invading San Marino? Like, let's be honest, okay? How much is Italy's GDP or population actually benefited from invading San Marino? Virtually nothing. Okay, however, the entire world now gets angry at them because they look like a bully pushing around the little guy. From a cost-benefit analysis, cost, the international reputation that you lose versus the benefit, almost nothing, there is no reason to invade San Marino. Hitler invaded the Soviet Union to conquer the Lebensraum. There isn't much Lebensraum in San Marino. The other point I like to make is that San Marino just doesn't have any enemies. San Marino holds no territory that other people have a claim on. San Marino has also never conquered land from other countries that want to get revenge. San Marino hasn't made any enemies, and you can't get invaded if you don't have enemies. Therefore, despite the fact that there's not a single country in the world that San Marino could successfully defend against an invasion from, apart from maybe Vatican City, San Marino has remained independent for over 1,000 years. It's outlived every other country. San Marino won! So in conclusion to this video, if you don't have anything worth invading, nobody's going to invade you.